The Ensemble Podcast is intended for professional financial advisors. This content is created in partnership with our sponsor, Net Wealth Investments Limited, ABN 85090 569 109, AFSL 230975, and is limited to publicly available information. Before acting on any general advice, you should consider whether appropriate and obtain financial advice from a qualified financial advisor. Ensemble does not hold an AFS license and does not provide any financial advice or services or endorse any general advice. If a PDS or IM exists, you should obtain a copy and review it thoroughly before making a decision.
AdviceTech. As if it wasn't enough to be across TMDs, Alpha, Beta, Rule of 72, and all the other nuances of financial advice. Now, advisors are expected to be across all the technology options too, and there's so many of them. But never fear, Peita D is here. Join me each week on a journey of discovery through the software and apps on offer for advisors and advice businesses. So let's dive in, fellow advice explorers.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by NetWealth. Imagine a world where you can offer clients access to local and international investments. A world where you can engage with clients meaningfully, backed by powerful data and insights with mobile-friendly technology. A world where you can build business efficiencies through scaled managed accounts and bulk reporting. And a world where you can get all the latest news, research and insights to spot the changes that really matter. Wealth is more than just money. It's about opportunity and progress. A world of opportunity awaits you at netwealth.com.au/woo.
Hello and welcome to the Ensemble AdviceTech Podcast. I'm Peita Diamantidis, and the guest joining me here today to deep dive into intelliflo was born in Nairobi, Kenya, created a video game at school that reached #1 in the gaming charts at the time, was a film script writer, and is a fellow Tolkien fan. Thank you so much for joining me on the show, Nick Eatock. Woo! Welcome.
Hi, Peita. Thank you very much. I didn't know we were fellow Tolkien fans. That's fantastic.
Tolkien is particularly Lord of the Rings, well, and The Hobbit. They're the only books I own where the spine is no longer visible. I've read them so much.
Oh, I've got a book just the same. It was my grandfather gave me the original Lord of the Rings, and it looks brilliant because it's old. But just like you, the spine has just fallen away on it, and it's really sad. I've got to be really careful with it.
Right. It's when you love it that much, it's at that point. And I feel sad for kids these days that they may never have a book like that because it's all on Kindle or whatever.
Exactly.
So, I'm so excited to dive into intelliflo and all the things that you guys can do. But first, let's just get to know you a little better through your own tech usage. What is your most used emoji? Do you even use emojis?
Of course I use emojis. Everyone uses emojis, right? Actually, I'll tell you what, though. I have changed my use of emojis, and I changed it because of education in Australia. So I was at the FPA event in November in Sydney, just last year. Yep. And there was someone talking on about what emojis actually mean these days, and it really educated me. There was this piece of, I always, I'm probably of an age where I'm slightly behind the majority of people on emoji use. Yep. So my default emoji used to be just a simple smiley face emoji. And then I discovered at the FPA last November that means passive aggressive. And I thought, that's no good.
I know. I was the same. It's like thumbs up is a similar thing. These days it can have a lot of sarcasm in the thumbs up.
Exactly.
Don't you love that? This little picture now has sarcasm implied.
Yeah. How were you to know that? It's ridiculous.
Right. This stuff's fraught with danger, I tell you.
So I am trying to expand my emoji use. Right. I quite like the flame one at the moment. That's quite good.
Yep.
And then the sort of the thank you, putting your hands together. I quite like that one. So I'm trying to move on from my old favourites is the truth.
Nice. Well, and in fact, I've got so conscious like yourself of it that I've now started using Bitmoji, which is when it uses your like a cartoon character of you into pictures, because then at least it's me doing it. I'm like,
yes, exactly.
Hopefully I can't send the wrong message with this anymore.
That is an excellent idea. I mean, you could always go back to your kids and say, is this appropriate to say? And normally it's, no, Dad, what on earth are you using that for? Yeah.
Silly. I love it. All right. And so then, look, we've all just lived with our smartphones, don't we? So you've got to wipe everything off and you're only allowed to keep 3 apps on your smartphone. What are you keeping?
Oh, good one. So there's a really boring one, which is Outlook on my phone because, that's just work stuff. But the reality is WhatsApp is the app I probably use the most. That's my default communication with everyone I communicate with. We kind of, again, from a worky perspective, use Slack a lot. So Slack is a really used app on my phone. I so much prefer Slack to email. It's just not true how much better it is. It's just fantastic. And then I'm a big sports nut, so I've got various sports apps about my favourite team, who are Liverpool Football Club, who won 7-0 on Monday. So that's not too bad.
You.
So
my husband's a Tottenham fan, so he was quite happy too. So yeah. So very nice. I like it. And Slack's interesting. It hasn't come a long way through financial advice in Australia. Of course, lots of other industries. We could not live without it. In fact, the business might shut down if we couldn't be using Slack. It has replaced, we have a zero internal email policy, and so you got to communicate via Slack.
Spot on. Those communication trails on regular email where you've got lots of people involved and it goes off in different branches and people end up responding to the wrong one, and you just think, God, why are we doing it this way? Go to Slack for everything. I love it. I love your policy. Zero email is a good way forward.
Yeah, and emails are harder to send a GIF too. We will love GIFs for communicating in the team with Slack. Bring a bit of humour, it's always a good thing.
Absolutely.
All righty, let's dive into intelliflo, shall we? So let's take it way up to the sort of high level and give me a sense, and for the listener who maybe is less aware of you guys as a brand or in the Australian space, where intelliflo sits in the advice tech sort of broad spectrum. What category does it sort of fall under? Who are you sort of normally lined up against, to give us some context?
Yeah, so I guess, our technology stack is quite wide now, Peita. So we two things. So we do lots of stuff. So that's including things like practice management, revenue management, client portals, financial modeling, and so on. All of these kind of things sit under the stack of a product we call intelliflo Office.
Yep.
So it's a pretty wide-ranging product, does lots of things, but it's also open architecture. We've been open architecture right since we started in 2004.
Okay.
So it's a central philosophy of the business. So we've got an open API. You can go to the URL today if you want to. In fact, if you want to, you can start writing an integration against our app just by going to that URL. You can sign up. You don't need to talk to anyone. And that means what we've got is a whole bunch of partners. And those partners can be software firms, large and small. It can be product providers, large and even larger. And those firms just integrate with our tech. And we think that's really important because it gives advice businesses choice of the tech stack that they want to use.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's our bits exclusively. Sometimes it's our bits alongside other bits. And they can mold their tech stack together because everything is really tightly integrated. Our open architecture approach has something, and this boring techie stuff, but it's got like 272 endpoints, which means you can pretty much do whatever you want in terms of integrating the technologies.
Wow. And that's for the listener who, like you say, is sort of not aware of that. The other end of that is you can transfer the name, their postal address, right? Is the other end. Yeah, we integrate. It's like, not really, like not where it counts. So you guys really are, so it's a deep level of intended integration if somebody's willing to, utilize the open API and sort of build that bridge between your tool and whichever one they need.
Exactly, because advisors have seen enough of those point integrations, which are I tend to call them marketing integrations, where it's just a single piece of data, and you can put a tick in the box saying yes, we're integrated with XYZ firm or whatever.
Yeah.
But actually, the reality is that it's the quality of that integration is actually the most important thing, because you want to use the third-party solutions together because you like them both. But you don't want to rekey. You don't want to rekey data. You want a seamless user experience, and that's what our API, DevHub, and Store does.
And it's exciting to have more and more players in the market having this view, because I think to date, a lot of Australian advisors would just sort of be ignoring integration only because it was very difficult for it to be possible. So why would you even bother understanding it as an option? It's like, yeah, good, that wonderful thing that you can't have. So, you know,
absolutely
right. It's really exciting to see that as sort of the new benchmark, is that this is what you should be expecting.
And Peita, we're hearing that from all the advice firms we talk to. I mean, they're desperate for a change, but also it feels like the Australian marketplace has been starved of the oxygen required to make a buoyant economy or marketplace of software businesses that can move forward and ultimately deliver better capability to advisors, which means those advisors can deliver engaging experiences with their clients. And that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. And look, we've sort of touched on it, so I think it is worth taking just a moment. I am curious about your insights into the difference between, you know, what a UK advisor wants or needs versus an Australian advisor from a tech perspective. Like, what are you guys seeing in the difference? Is it, look, Peter, broadly it's the same, or are the markets at such different points that it's quite a different need or request that you get?
At its essence, financial advice is the same the world around, right? You know, the outcome of financial advice is exactly the same. There's local or regional differences between the players and the partners in that marketplace, but the actual need is just the same. So what we're seeing more and more is advisors looking for digitized experiences where they can engage effectively with their clients. And no matter what the age, I think there used to be this thing in the marketplace saying, you know, digital technology and client portals and all that kind of stuff is only for the people who are 20s and their 30s and what have you. And the reality is, we look at our data, we've got 368,000 adults using our client portal today. That's one in every 145 UK adults uses our client portal technology. And so it's a really big sample size. And what you see from that is that the age group that is most engaged, that logs on most frequently and does stuff within the solution, are people in their 50s and 60s. Simple as that.
Yeah. And it's an interesting, I got asked on a panel a couple of weeks ago about even older clients and, but you know, if say your client portal was an app on their phone, but you know, they're not going to want to do that. And I said, well, the thing is, though, if you get them to put that app on their phone, they probably only have 6 other apps. So you're going to be on the front page, like you'll be top of the pops. You know, that's probably one of the few apps they'll ever use. Whereas with younger generation, you're going to be 7 pages in. Like, you're competing for real estate as an app in that world. So I think there's so many assumptions we make with this stuff, isn't there? That what will work or what won't, without understanding people's behaviours in a deeper sense.
Yeah, and the terrible thing is those phrases sort of all started and originated about 20 years ago, where we were saying, you know, it's only for the millennials. But 20 years has passed, and not just 20 years has passed, so everyone's a little bit older. But not just that, but we also had COVID, which was dreadful in so many ways it's not true. But what it did mean was that people engaged with their technology for all sorts of really good reasons, and it's just become part of what they do. And that applied particularly, I think, for people in these sort of older age cohorts, because they needed to, because they wanted to, you know, keep in touch with their families, with their grandchildren, whatever it might be. So it's a brave new world for sure.
It is, and I do think there's we've already had the tipping point where for almost every generation it has actually made life easier. Whereas I think, to your point, prior to even COVID, some of them like, well, do I really need to worry about technology? You know, for some of them, whereas, you know, the QR code that could let them do something quite simple, they've got, that's easier. I don't have to fill in my name and address, or whatever that is. So I do think it sort of did accelerate things, didn't it? You know, in terms of people's understanding or willingness. So, and we've sort of got to ride that wave. I think we've got to take advantage of that accelerated learning and double down. Yeah, 100%. Double down a bit.
So I mean, essentially, back to your question, Peita, the needs are the same, but what we do see about the Australian market that's different from the UK marketplace is the UK marketplace is much more integrated, many more players integrating across, and there's not that level that's happened here. For whatever reason, it hasn't happened here, and we want to provide that. We want to give advisors a real chance to change, and to have a vibrant marketplace of technology.
So then, given all of the elements that sit in intelliflo Office and the pieces that it's providing, then there isn't really in that sense a primary user, because I'm betting that the expectation is if you utilize the tool, even if you don't use everything in it, that most or all members of the team should be interacting with it. Is that the general assumption is this is a core part of somebody's tech space as opposed to an ancillary part? Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. So you look at the core users, and core users are either advisors or power planners. That's kind of historically where we've been, with administrator people sitting in there too. And they tend to be in the application for about 6 hours a day.
Okay.
So that's kind of how they run their advice business. It's how they deal with initial advice for a client, taking them all the way through that advice ecosystem. So the review, the fact finding, the advice recommendations itself, documents shared back, SOAs shared back with the client, signing of those digitally as well, all the way through to implementation. So it covers all of that. And particularly important, or we think really important, is that ongoing servicing of the client thereafter. But if you look at the people who use our technology most, it's actually the end client.
Right.
We've got far more end client users than we do have advisor and power planner users, just because that's every advisor in the UK, at least those who use the technology well, service about 220 clients on average. So there's a 220 to 1 ratio of clients versus advisors for those firms who adopt it well. So we like to see it as an ecosystem where all of the relevant parties are using the software to some extent or another. The clients aren't going to be in there 6 hours a day. Clearly they're not, but they're going to be in there when they want to be in there.
So it sounds like then, because the evolution or introduction and evolution of portals, or any of those sort of tools, client portals, has been somewhat mixed and sporadic in some cases. So it sounds like for intelliflo, this is a core part of that. Therefore, you would expect as you onboard things, it's onboarding the clients as individuals. As opposed to just onboarding the practice. So it sounds like it truly is to extract that value, to really get it humming. It's taking the client portal as a key part of that.
Absolutely. So, for it to be really intuitive as a process, and an advice process or servicing process that engages advisors and clients alike, it's got to be integrated. So it's got to feel like one ecosystem, and that means it is one ecosystem. You don't think of it as separate solutions. In fairness, if you want to use third-party client portals, that's fine too. You just choose one that's also integrated via our API stack. But the advisors we see who make the best of the technology use our own client portal because it's better integrated than others. That's the reality.
And fair enough, if that's also the sort of approach you're having, this is far more embedded, then it makes sense that the portal you've got does a lot of what they need. So that makes perfect sense. Is there a type of practice or size or approach or mentality that you find, intelliflo really works for, and any others that, say, your team that are out there engaging with individual practices will go, oh, if I see that, generally they're going to struggle to take on the system? Is there any sort of standout that way?
Not really. I don't think it's about, in this context, size doesn't matter. The reality, I'm going to be careful. The reality is that if I look across the firms that use our technology, you've got small advice firms, just one single advice firms, right the way up to our largest users that are 10,000 advisors plus. We've got small firms and large firms, and so that doesn't really matter. It can appeal to firms of all sizes, but the thing that distinguishes it most from the successful users who really adopt the technology is a mindset. It's not about. So it's a mindset that says, technology is going to be a differentiator for us. It's not going to be something that we use because we have to. They use it because they want to. They want it to make a difference in the way they operate. They want to be more effective. They want to be more efficient. They want to be more engaging with their clients. They want to really embrace the capability to make them advisors that are attractive to end clients, and they want this. It doesn't take away from the relationships that decent advisors have with their clients. It embellishes them. It makes them even better, even more engaged. And those are the kinds of firms that make the most of the solution.
And I guess, another part of that, when you've got a system that is like this, that sort of quite does a lot of the elements required, then I'm betting, therefore, there's elements of practice management or even license management that would get folded into that. And that's something that's difficult to balance too from a tech provider is, well, compliance would like this and would like that perspective, whereas the advisor user, well, they don't need to see that. I mean, it might need to be collected, but they don't need to see that. How do you guys balance that in terms of the way the tech works or even what people, see where they're engaging? How do you balance those competing needs?
So a few things. Firstly, we're a software as a service business, so multi-tenant SaaS, and forgive the technology acronym, but it's really important to us. And what that means is that there is just a single version of our software that operates across 3 geographical regions around the world, the US, the UK, and Australia. And that means every single firm using our tech is using that same version. Okay, so that's really important for a start. Now, it's localized to each of those markets because there's different terminology, there are different product providers, there's different tax rules and so on, all of that kind of stuff. But it's essentially the same tech. And what that means is, because we've got over 2,800 firms using the same version of the tech, is it has to be immensely configurable to deal with that environment. Right. Because every firm is slightly different. They have a different approach to their documentations, their workflows, how they show up to their clients, what they say, what they don't say, all of those kind of things. They're entirely different. And so it has to be a configurable solution. This isn't customizing and writing code. In fact, there's not a single line of code written for all those 2,800 different configurations. Everything is configurable within the solution. So that gives a great deal of power to the advice firms who use our tech. It means they can get going pretty quickly. It means they can adapt things pretty quickly. So as their needs change, or the market needs change, or the client needs change, they can react to that really responsibly. They're not coming back to us and saying, intelliflo, we don't understand how this coding has been written or something. Can you change it? Because there is no coding. There's just configuration. They can do all of that kind of stuff. So that creates a real difference. And what it means is that when you're looking at the different user types within an advice firm, so an advice practice, whether it's compliance or the client-facing advisor or anyone between, they can configure a workflow that works differently for those different role types within the organization, but have control and visibility across everything within that business. So that creates we think that's really different in the marketplace. Yeah.
And certainly, configuration is so interesting, isn't it? Because like you say, you need to be able to react to a specific situation. And so even just from what is standing out to the team when they log in, even on a client's base, something that flashes out at them, that really stands out, that can change over time depending on what your focus for the team or the business is at that point in time. So just being able to, shift according to that is powerful, because we all know, most people will look at a series of information, and which is generally, a system has a whole lot of information in it. If you just put it all in front of people, different people will notice different things. So there is some guidance you've got to give to that in terms of what you want people to focus on. What's the thing you always want them to notice, right? So being able to configure that is important because, like you say, each business will be different at what stage, what they're focusing on, what they want their team to ignore, whatever. For that business. So that's exciting, actually. And so then, it's not a small system. This is not a one little thingy that you're doing deeply and well. So because of that, is there something that you and your team would suggest that people do prior to, shifting or taking on something like intelliflo? Is there any work they should do to optimize the implementation process or the speed with which they can implement?
Often that gets done on the way. So, so if you take things like data migrating data from one system to another, so from whatever is the incumbent technology along to ours, is a process that we handhold them all the way through. We've got teams who do this. We've got migration tools that have done, over 2,800 firms have come into the technology. So we've got a huge amount of experience in this. And what we find most frequently is that advice firms aren't comfortable that the quality of the data that they've got at the moment in their system is as good as it could be.
Yeah.
So what we do is we clean it, we enhance it, we get rid of duplication, and we do all of that kind of stuff as just part of the process. So it means when you bring the data in, you actually end up already on day one in a better place because we've cleaned the data as part of that. We do think that's the right and the best place to do it. You could, as an advice practice, actually decide to do that in advance, and that's not a bad thing to do either. But we've got capability to help you along the way. The other thing, I guess, and it comes back to that SaaS methodology, means that actually we've got perfect insight across all firms to say, this is kind of what works for advisors and this is what doesn't in our experience.
Right.
You know? So we'll help them with the workflow. Workflow is incredibly powerful type stuff, but it's also easy to over-workflow an organization, you know, where you mandate every single step along the way, and then suddenly you find that there are some examples and situations where it's mandated it too much and you need a bit more flexibility. Every firm's at a different point on that scale, but the reality is our customer success teams implement and work with firms to say, right, this is what we think works for an organization of your size, your profile, the kind of thing you're doing. And we like to apply that expertise to the software. The important thing is that I say it frequently, I probably bore people on this, but software as a service doesn't mean just providing the software. It's more about the service. You know, that relationship with our customers and them with us, we see as a partnership. And that's a partnership where basically we want to make sure that this works for them as well as it possibly can. And that means we should be both partners in how to make sure it's configured well, it reacts to their changes as well. They don't feel that they're constrained. They don't feel that they have to come back to us for everything, but they do feel they'd like to come back to us for advice. And they do, and they regularly do.
And I do think it's probably you've tapped into one of my pet peeves because look, I'm tech curious. I am that person. I go out and try all sorts of things out. And outside of the advice world, the thing that is done particularly well by, rapidly growing tech, Canva or things like this are a great example, is they make it really easy to start and then really easy to learn more and become an expert. Like it's this journey they can take you on because they know their audience and they've seen it over and over again. Whereas what I struggle with in the advice world here is often there's a lot of tools, like as in resources. Oh yeah, there's a video and there's a video and that, but they're not giving you the insights of having seen people fail at this or seen the pitfalls they always hit, or like we've only seen our practice. You guys have seen, like you say, hundreds and thousands of practices. So, those insights are invaluable. Now, it doesn't mean that it's the same step-by-step process, but I'm betting there's the thing, don't start with this, it's unnecessary till later. Or if you don't get that right, these things won't work. That sort of stuff is really valuable. And it's that insight, the insights from the pitfalls, I think is such a great leg up for a practice. And so recognizing that is exciting to me.
That's great to hear, and it's certainly what we hear from advice firms as well. That constant message. Everyone's slightly different in that regard, isn't it? Right. So you've got some firms, and we see this with technology outside the advice space, that sometimes we don't want to talk to anyone. We just want to go online and we want to browse videos or content or whatever to do something because that's where we are at that point in time, or that's the type of person we are, and you've got to create that capability. But others want to really talk through it, and they really want to understand and learn from the sort of best practice experience from others. And there's no right or wrong answer to that. It's just that we're all different. And so long as you can provide an ecosystem where you can get both of those ends of the spectrum and anywhere in between, then I think you're doing the right thing.
And you've mentioned workflows a couple of times, and I'd love to get a bit of a clarification, I guess. So, there is the workflow as in, you might do something like this in the system and then it's going to remind you to do the next thing, versus an automation where you do this thing in the system and then it automatically sends up the follow-up email. Where do you guys sit in that in terms of the way the tool can work for a practice?
So it can do both. What we do find is that smaller advice businesses actually tend to be less prescriptive on the workflows.
Yep.
Because the reality is you've got a small number of people doing the jobs, and they don't need to have sort of mission critical scalability in there where there are teams working on something. They don't have that. They have the benefit of not needing that, but they have the challenges of not getting to that scale necessary. And then you see firms at the other end where actually, that automation is really important so that they can ensure things happen in exactly the same way every time. Again, there's not a right or a wrong answer to that.
No.
You choose, you are the type of business you are, and we believe that we've got to meet advice firms where they are. There's no point trying to impose a set of principles or processes on them that actually just aren't right for them at that point in time. They may change over time, but you meet them where they are, and the technology should do that.
Yeah, I completely agree, because all of us have a different team that are doing it too. So if it's touching multiple different hands, that's different to one person that does a huge chunk of the work, as an example, so you've got to be, it's got to reflect that. And I know for us, like we just recently, actually, we picked up, we'd automated one particular process, and there were steps in there that were completely unnecessary. Like we just overcooked it, and we get together frequently. Luckily, the team are at the point now where that's literally a team meeting topic, is how we're doing things, and something that feels like we're doing that unnecessarily. Does anybody else think that? And we talk that through a lot, but it's so easy to do. I sort of view it as a wonderful symptom of the fact that you are focusing on your processes, you are thinking about them. So I just figure it's a side effect. This is what's going to happen.
Yeah, very much so. And you also, Peita, you get that bit which is kind of not about workflow in the traditional sense, which is kind of one task moving to another and automating some stuff. You also get that bit that, and we're really proud of this in our software, which is actually the user journey. And the user journey is created by UIs and wizards and so on that take you along that workflow without you knowing, kind of without you realizing, because it's just intuitive.
Fabulous.
Yeah, it's got to be intuitive stuff. It's got to be integrated. We like to innovate like that, and that's a really important watchword for the business. And so we listen to what our customers are telling us. We upgrade the software regularly. Every day new capability goes in there, and much of it driven by our customers. We have something called customer-inspired change, and you only get that when you listen to your customers and they're saying, well, this works well, but it would be even better if it did this. And, if a number of firms are saying that, think, you know what? It's going to do that. We're going to add that upgrade to the capability.
And it is such a different way to look at things. I'm old enough, and a whole lot of the listeners are going to say, Peter, I have no earthly idea what you're talking about, but I'm old enough to remember using a system in an insurance company that was DOS. So /F/C and you had to know what each of those codes meant to get you to the thing you were trying to get to, right? So it was like the training was so deep, because like it's not like you could just work it out on the fly. There was no possibility of that. These days, what I find interesting is how many systems still feel like the user experience is designed like that. Like you have to know to go to the thing and then the thing and then the thing to get to the final thing. Like it's not intuitive at all, which doesn't make any sense given how smart tech is these days to me. It doesn't, why do we need to understand this branching of all the things you've got to branch down into to get to? So I agree with you. I think the more we have of that, then the thing is, the faster you can get a new team member up to scratch, for example. The easier it is to have somebody just step in and take over from a team member who's sick, or like all of that. Just, you don't need as much of this sort of IP of all of that understanding, because the system can just sort of take you through it. I completely agree. That's the user experience is so, so important.
Yeah. And that's a reflection sometimes of where software is in the cycle and when it was built. So, your reference there, Peita, to DOS, was the reality is, there weren't really actually any alternatives at the time. No. So, of course, that was the way. That's just kind of how it worked. And even the early days of Windows-based stuff, actually was really complex. And I think, very often in the old days, software was built by software engineers and software engineers in isolation who are really good at what they do, but they aren't necessarily user experience people. And so, the good software is built by a combination of people, all with different strengths and disciplines, and collectively as a team come together with something that's truly remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you've mentioned the portal, and I'm betting that's the manifestation of sort of what the client experience can be with the system or with the advisor. how far have you guys gone down in terms of what you can do or behave in the portal? So it sounds like executing a document's possible. So e-signatures, that sort of thing. Yeah. Data feeds, is that where, so it's reflecting something that's within the system that might be their portfolio or things like that? Is that, that's available?
Yeah.
What other elements are there in the portal?
That's all there. There's a full gamified fact find. So a lot of advisors use this as their fact finding approach, and the reality is we think that's really important. The traditional fact finding approach, let's be honest, is a process whereby a client is asked lots of questions that they don't necessarily know the answer to. They find it quite challenging themselves. Sometimes those clients will guess because they feel a little bit awkward about something. They don't want to feel uninformed about their finances. So you won't necessarily even get the right answers. We often call it a guess find rather than a fact find. But if you actually provide technology where the client themselves can fill in that fact find, then actually what they do is they fill it in more accurately. They take their time over doing it. It might take them a few evenings at their own time and over their leisure, probably a glass of wine in their hand or something when they're doing it. But they start adding more information than would have been added before. Right. And it's all done on their time. The advisor has to do nothing at that point, which means the advisor can concentrate on the value add. And their value add isn't fact-finding collection. It's maybe the soft facts around fact-finding, but definitely not the hard facts. And it's about the advice itself. So that creates a very different dynamic. We love that capability. We've got open banking capability as well, certainly in the UK, and we're bringing that to the Australian version in the next few months as well. And that's really interesting because that's another element of that fact-finding approach. It gives you real data about income, expenditure, where people are spending stuff. What's essential expenditure, what's optional, and so on. So that's a really interesting approach. We've got a really strong financial modeling capability. Which is really cool. And I think one of the things I'm proudest about that, and people use our cash flow modeling capability in front of the client because it very clearly through the technology, not some dry document that is presented to a client and they don't understand. It's actually visual, engaging, interactive technology that shows on the left side kind of where you are at the moment in terms of meeting your hopes, dreams and aspirations, that sort of goal setting. And then on the right-hand side, what the value of the advice is to help you get there. And you can very clearly illustrate the benefit of the advice. And for all of us in this industry, we understand the value of advice, but clients often don't. And so it's really important to ensure that clients do get a view. Actually, this is what they're getting. And I think that kind of technology more widely rolled out is actually what's going to solve some of the advice gap. The advice gap that incidentally exists across the globe. This isn't an Australian thing purely. This is UK has it, US has it, and so on.
And so then presumably the client can also, so if there's some documentation need or evidence of or whatever, they can upload that into the app. Is that something they can, instead of using, so essentially, avoiding email, this is the place where they provide that. What about, have you got to that stage where, say, there is a workflow that the advisor's working towards and there's something the client needs to do? Have you got to the point where that's sort of integrate, the client gets it done and therefore it triggers something for the advisor? Is that there yet?
In some areas, Peita, but it is one of the things we're looking to improve on so that the actual workflow definition can actually then drive change behavior within the client portal. So our client portal is called Personal Finance Portal. It's just a capability that you get within Office. You don't pay any extra for it. It's just part of the solution. One of the things we love about it, and certainly that I should have mentioned, because you're right, we've got all that secure messaging and document signing and sharing bit. That's kind of the basic capability. But what we've also done with the technology is, just like our core sort of practice management intelliflo Office solution, is we allow third-party solutions to be built into the client portal. So you could go to a third party and say, I really like what they've done in, risk profiling, for example. I really like what they've done there. Wouldn't that be a great thing to have within our client portal? Because you brand the client portal, right?
Yep.
So it's XYZ advisor firm. That is their brand, their colors, and so on. And then you can choose a third-party solution, or even build one if you want to, that sits within that framework. So you can have a client portal experience that is unique to your business. utilizing that technology. We think that's a complete game changer, USP in the marketplace, and you can configure it so it's different for different clients of yours. So as a client is going through a different journey with you, and so initial client, maybe in that sort of early nurturing stage of a client, you might have a different set of screens and capability than for a client who's gone through full advice, and maybe you're at the servicing end of the relationship with that client. And it can show up differently to each of those different users in their journey. So same user, but at different stages in their life with you.
Yeah, that is exciting, because that's, I could see that then folding out. You might have certain offers that involve partners, like others that you've sort of, other expertise you've factored in. Then if I'd imagine getting creative, you can sort of start to fold that in where some wouldn't see taking them off to something that's about the other provider, but some would, because they're the one that's part of the, the service that you're offering to those clients. Yeah.
Absolutely spot on, Peter. And ultimately, it comes back to the point that really, we like to think that our technology is pretty great and we build lots of capability and it should deal with most advisor needs. Yeah. But the reality is the marketplace keeps changing, and there's some really great innovations that other businesses, often small businesses, are creating. And we want to give them the oxygen to actually deliver capability out to advisors. That's really important. You shouldn't feel, in my view, as an advice practice, that you are restricted by your choice of technology provider. You should feel that you are freed up to do what you want to do by your choice of technology
provider.
Powered by, Yes, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think, while there'll always be some things that it makes sense for, so in terms of the sort of guerrilla system like you guys have and the energy and the people you have that can apply attention to solve a particular problem, you can't be all things to all people. It's just not possible, because the minute you do, you're the average. It's not the best solution. It's the average. Whereas if you can fold in some, narrow providers, then, the end result for you and the advice, practices that work for you is heightened. I mean, a good example, dive into these integrations. A good example is, so Product Rex, which is, it's Nick is really another Nick. This is has built Product Rex. It does this narrow thing, but geez, it does it well. And so, I was excited to see that you guys have that as one of the integrations, because it solved a massive problem for a lot of practices. Yeah,
no, he's built a great capability, as you say, very relatively narrow in terms of what it does, but really good. And that's fantastic. That's the kind of partners we love to have. But we're open on that, whoever the partner is, that's fine.
Yeah. And so one of the other ones I saw on the list, which was timely because I actually interviewed them last week, was Oxford Risk. And that's relative. I mean, the Aussies, we're sort of relatively new to what they do. And so in terms of a tool like that, where would that get folded in, or how would that integrate, for example, with intelliflo? Where would that turn up in the system?
So that sits. So the Oxford Risk integration is within our sort of advice flow, and the way that advice flow for an advisor sits within the system, which takes them through a set of steps. One bit of which obviously is the risk profiling side, or ATR, and so that's kind of how that sits. But in future, they may want to start integrating with our client portal capability. I mean, that new architecture for the client portal we actually only released in December. Okay. And it's interesting, actually, we released it across all three regions, UK, US, and Australia, at exactly the same time. So that's the nature of having a single version offering. It means you're not restricted by the version that you're on, not being able to access this particular capability. Everyone can access this because there is just a single version.
Because there's nothing more frustrating than seeing some great press or a release on something and then you can't get that version. It's heartbreaking. I'd prefer to not know about it, if that's the case. Don't tell me about this wonderful thing I can't do. That's great. I mean, that sort of broad approach it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? It just makes sense that it's that easy. Is there any features or sections in the sort of suite of tools you've got that you think practices or advisors don't really take enough advantage of, that you think are maybe a little unloved but have some real gold in there if people sort of understood what they could do and then, incorporated them into their practice?
I mean, there's stuff like some of the compliance stuff, actually. Compliance often, I think, is reserved, proper compliance processing is often reserved for the larger organizations. They're the ones who really focus on this. But the reality is there's some benefits to process, even for the smaller organizations to use. So they don't. And I think that's one of these interesting areas where actually compliance in some respects can deliver on multiple levels. Don't just think of it as compliance. Think of it as kind of ensuring that you're following a consistent way of delivering your advice, which actually then means you can be more scalable, which if you want to as a business means you can then take on more clients and more advisors and so on, and you can grow more effectively. That's one of those things that I think sometimes gets misunderstood. I do think if we were going back maybe 6 or 7 years, I would say we were at a point where even just the client portal technology itself, a lot of advisors were fearful actually of the technology and how it was going to disintermediate, in their view, their relationships with their clients. And and here we are 6 years or so later, and now 98% of the advisors who use our technology in the UK use our client portal. That's the reality. So then at one point it was 0% and 0% saying that they needed a client portal. That has changed immensely. So I think it's really easy, and that's just in 6 short years. I think it's really easy to say, this isn't right for us, and that's fine, but review that because the marketplace reviews.
Yeah. And I think the way we ask those questions is important too. I think it's so easy to let's survey that client base, or, at every review meeting, I want you to ask a few things. Do you think you need a client portal? Well, of course, the client's probably going to say no. They don't know what it is. What are you talking about? Whereas saying, would it be easier if on the fly, these things you could just do when you're on the bus and you could tick something and it would authorize? Oh, yeah, actually, that sounds really good. Like whatever the thing is, you've got to ask the right questions because it's ridiculous. I mean, I feel that way a little bit about the cost of advice, to the consumer, and we're very focused on, we need to have that scalable offering, or people won't pay for advice. And I feel like sometimes the question's wrong. I feel like the messaging we've got back so far is people won't pay for the advice the way it's delivered now. They might write a couple $1,000 check for it being delivered a different way, or it being packaged together a different way. So, the way we ask those questions is so important. And with tech, of course, we're just embedded with it now. This is something that nobody's questioning whether we live with technology every minute of every day. So now it's probably a matter of, if you don't have one, you've got to have a really good reason not to have a client portal, probably. We're probably going to get to that point, right?
Yeah. I think we're pretty much there already in my view, Peita, because I don't see how you can operate, in 2023, I don't see how you can operate a business without understanding that most of your clients, maybe not all of them, but most of your clients will want some form of digital engagement. When we look at the stats of those of clients using the client portal technology in the UK, we see that a decent percentage, just under 40% of it, is used outside office hours.
Right.
Okay, so how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that engagement, that interest, that updating of information, that clarification of information if you don't have a client portal? And the honest answer is you either work 24/7 and you're always online, and some people are, that's okay, or you have a client portal. One of the two.
Yeah. And I think the whole convenience thing for the client, I probably don't take enough, or make enough allowance for. I don't know about you, but I love, when I go onto something, any sort of tool that I'm going to have to, a website, and I'm trying to dig into something, if I can go onto a chat and just get some clarification while I'm there, it's such a relief. The whole, if I've got to send an email to a generic email address and wonder if they're going to reply, now that works. But it's a different experience, and so recognizing that people are doing this, like you say, in their own time. It could be 2 a.m. because they've finally got a moment to themselves and they're going through all their financial stuff and they think of something, forgot to ask Peita this, or whatever it is. We need to, really think about that more carefully. I think, and I think the other thing I'd say, and you mentioned scale, and I mean, it's an interesting environment now where particularly maybe new entrants to the advice market in terms of advisors or practices, they probably, some of them resist, growth for growth's sake. They're sort of building a lifestyle business. And so often when they see things that are about scale, they think it doesn't apply to them. And the thing is, you can build some processes and some efficiency and some workflows, like you say, into your practice, and you might be able to have your whole team only work 4 days a week. Like, you could become an employer of choice because you shut down Fridays every week, so it doesn't have to be you go from 1 to 20 advisors, right? It's about the way you use that time.
It's a really good point, Peita. And it also talks to understanding that you're not just choosing your technology, you're not just choosing it for the advisors, and you're not just choosing it for your clients, you're also choosing it for your staff and your colleagues. They want to have technology that actually frees them up, does away with some of the things that are challenging or boring or dull to do, and means that they can provide a value add. And if you choose to use that to scale your business, that's fine. That's great. Yeah. If you want to grow larger, but you don't have to. You can choose to do that to free up time in other ways.
Yeah. Absolutely. Is there, in terms of then, what's coming down the track, what you guys have in the pipeline, what's on the radar, or what's, soon to be released into the future for intelliflo?
Quite a bit of stuff. I mentioned the open banking stuff that we're bringing to the client portal, personal balance portal in just in a few months here in Australia. We're also going to be bringing some capability around joining up the financial modeling capability with that client portal capability. So actually you can share financial modeling scenarios directly with the client in an interactive format that they can continue to live and breathe through, or incidentally vice versa. So the client can start with it. And that, I think that's a really interesting dynamic. So that's going to be something we're bringing to the marketplace this year, and a host of other things. Innovation is really important to us, and actually, if you've got a software as a service backbone, you have to innovate, because you've got all the ingredients to allow innovation to happen. You've got all the code in one place, everyone on the same version. It means you can evolve and innovate. If you don't, it's really difficult, because you've got software in different branches, different versions, people who haven't upgraded, people who have upgraded. How do you support all of that? That's really, really challenging.
And for you, in terms of, because you've been there from the beginning, of course, then is there anything a little further down the track that's I'll be excited when we get to this point? Like, is there any of that you're sort of looking ahead and hoping, wishing, pushing the team ultimately to get to down the line?
Oh, I always want the next new thing, right? Peita, it's probably a flaw in my makeup. I don't know.
Yeah, we need a support group, I think. People like
yes, absolutely. You always want to continue to innovate and continue. And actually, there is an important point there. I think, a well-grounded software vendor, and we think we're one, actually does recognize that actually, yes, there's lots of stuff that's important about the shiny new thing, but you've also got to make sure that customers use the technology that's there today and not just build the new things. And that means you want to continually enhance all the small things as well.
Right.
And you only get that by listening to customers who might say, I like this capability, but I have to do 5 clicks. Is there a way I could do 2 clicks instead? And that doesn't sound like very much, but if I'm doing that 1,000 times a day, that's really impactful for me. And you need to listen to your customers to understand that stuff. Sometimes that's actually quite trivial to build. And so, it's a win-win for absolutely everyone. And that's so it's not just the big shiny new things. Sometimes it's even the small stuff as well.
Look, and the multiple click things is I'm obsessed with that because you're right. It's the multiple things you do multiple times a day, but also it's a training issue then because they've got to know how to get through the click-throughs. You know, and it's one of the biggest issues with the product provider sites is you've got to know where that thing lives. So I completely agree with you on that front. Is there I'm curious about your view too. I'm a big fan of where data or the way we represent it could go. The industry is notoriously bad at getting to the point of infographics or real imagery to capture. We can't let go of a graph. It's very hard for us to do anything aside from some sort of column-based or dot-based graph. Do you see that changing over time where we can get a bit clever, a bit more artistic about the way we are representing some of this data so it's a bit more beautiful maybe than it is now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm glad you asked me that, Peita, because it's one thing I did forget to mention about stuff that's coming this year is capability we call business intelligence. Yep. And essentially one of the things we did last year was we migrated all of our systems globally onto a single AWS infrastructure. So everything is in Amazon AWS. Yeah. Which is kind of, if you're a small vendor today, just starting up, that's where you go anyway. Yeah. But for us long-established vendors, it's actually quite a job to migrate all of that and move across. We had 8 million lines of code that we had to rewrite to do it. So it wasn't a small job at all. Yeah. But one of the benefits of being there, aside from scale and performance and all that kind of stuff, is that it gives us access to capability that we never had access to before. Right. So we've been working with Amazon as a sort of a prestigious partner of theirs on a global basis to bring their Amazon QuickSight capability, which is business intelligence with infographic capability, along to all of our data, to all of our users as just a core part of the solution. So it's going to visualize the data in a way that you've never seen before. I don't think the advice sector has seen before, either here or in the UK, in fairness. This is groundbreaking for the UK as well. So we're really excited to do that. One of the bits we're doing as part of that is ensuring that the data itself, and I don't just mean select bits of our data, but all the data can be shared in a Snowflake account for firms as well. So they can integrate it with whatever other data they've got just by signing up to that. So it creates a real democracy over the data. We'd like to think that most people will use just the standard sort of dashboards and insights infographics that we'll have within the solution. And I think for many firms that will be brilliant and game changing enough for them. But there'll be some firms, and particularly at the larger end of town, who say, we want the data itself, and so we can empower both of those with that same best in class technology. Yeah,
and look, it's a mindset shift that is. It's difficult for lots of people to understand because they don't know the difference. So there's raw data, there's a representation of data, i.e. graph or similar thing, and then there's something that's pure insight, right? So it's literally giving you the answer that you need to conclude. And what we do generally sits very firmly in the middle of where you need to interpret the data and the graph to get the insight, right? And I think that's the shift that I'm going to be excited about, is when it's easier, when you don't need to translate every graph. You don't, and I mean, you just got to go to a fund manager session and watch some of those when it takes them 10 minutes to talk you through the graph. And I'm like, this is the difference. This is not what we should be providing, Well, and we do that as advisors too. It's like, no. Where's the infographic that just gives the insight?
Exactly. You want the infographic to be understandable in itself. You want it to be interactive so you can drill down into a point and get more information as you drill down. So that's about interactivity. It shouldn't just be a static graph. Yeah. It should be something you can actually power down into. And then the third thing, and again, we're doing this with the Amazon QuickSight stuff, is having a layer of machine learning on top of it, which creates what it does. Actually, the technology looks for patterns and displays them to you in English, in just words. This is what we've noticed from this data. That's that's incredible. Because not everyone looks at graphs in charts in the same way. We all spot slightly different things, and some people actually don't react well to that. Some people would prefer a sentence to describe it.
Correct. And in fact, I would argue most don't react well because they've got scarring that has to do with school maths and like all of this. Like most of them aren't nerds like me, like that actually, woohoo, a graph, that's not how most people react. So I think, adjusting for that is exciting. And I was taught this lesson, by actually, it was a graphic designer who pointed out to me that the only data or graphical representation of data that's ever gone viral are those, Time magazine or, those infographics that are capturing something over time, interactive, blobs. They're blobs. They're not charts in the typical sense. They're blobs and size and color, and they're interactive. And they're like, and you can instantly get the point. Like you don't need to be a rocket scientist to get it. I'm like, oh, okay. Now I'm seeing the difference. That's a level of understanding that's quite different to communicate. And fingers crossed. We'll all keep our fingers crossed we can get to that sooner rather than later. There is something I can think we've missed, actually, before I say, is there anything we've missed? You've got the community. So that's the community of users, I'm presuming, that can all interact. Talk me through what's involved in that and what value that can deliver for a practice.
Yeah, it's a capability that essentially captures a lot of information. So standard stuff like training materials, we talked about training materials, help guides, all of that kind of capability. But it's also a community where users can come together to answer commonly held questions that they might each have.
Right.
So this has been running in the UK for years now, and it's fantastic because you get the engagement of advisors helping each other out. And we're there too, right? So we're there to help, but it's actually really nice often for an advisor from firm A to hear from other firms about how they've done something, and how they've achieved a particular outcome. And so we really like that. It's a fantastic way forward. We're going to continue to power and improve what we do within that, and see that very much as kind of like the first step to allowing advisors to help themselves, but also to gain access to other advisors. If your firm wants to enable you to do that, some firms, particularly large firms, sometimes turn off that capability, and that's fine. Right. But it's up to you. If you want to have that, if you want to have that access to information, then you can do.
And look, the truth is that there isn't a developer out there who will manage to shortcut 5 steps in a system that's anywhere near as quick as a user will. And particularly, I think admin users, like I always hand something to the admin team, and within seconds, they've worked out ways to shortcut things, potentially break it too, but also, like those shortcuts. And so being able to share those, collectively. And I guess, do you guys do that via region or can it be sort of, so could we be talking to advisors in the UK about how they use it?
It's regional specific at the moment. Yep. So there's Australia. You're either in Australia and you're talking with just Australian people, or you're in the UK and you're just talking with UK users. Yeah. And some of that is because the regional differences of the localization mean that actually some things aren't appropriate from one capability to another. So we think that's the right approach. That may change, though, over time. So, as our user base grows in all 3 territories, we might see that there's some really healthy crossover areas. So the capability, the technology that we use to power that is capable of sharing. That we just decided not to, because we think that's the right approach at this point in time. Yeah,
of course. And I guess, it probably depends on elements of the system. Some bits, you're right, it just wouldn't be relevant, whereas others are just, probably similar in each location. I can see that making sense. Anything else we've skipped over or missed, do you think?
Oh, we've covered quite a lot, I think, haven't we? It's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed it.
We have. Well, and it feels like it's a bit of long as a piece of string too. So I think that at some point there's been a lot of focus and interest on client portals. So at some point we may even have a chat just going a bit deeper on the portal itself into the future. I think I'll get asked a lot about each of the portals. So we can consider that, folks, down the track. But all right, Advice Explorers, if you'd like to find out more about intelliflo, then the website link is in the episode show notes, along with Nick's LinkedIn details. Now, that Nick will need to point you in the right direction of the local people to handle that. So perhaps, if you'd like to give him a big high five for the episode, feel free, but perhaps use the website to connect with the Australian team. As the CEO, I'd imagine he doesn't necessarily handle the sales queries that much. But thank you, Nick, so much for joining us, and I guess for bringing a large-scale competitor to the Australian market. I love anybody that can keep the other heavyweights on their toes. That's a good thing for everybody. So thank you for bringing that out here and giving us more options.
Good stuff, Peter. No, thank you. And, people absolutely can reach out to me on LinkedIn, but we also have a fantastic team here in Australia who are all great people, passionate about what we do, here to help.
Lovely. Thank you so much for your time. So, are you a current user of intelliflo? I know they haven't been around the Aussie market for a super long time, but there certainly are practices that are successfully using it out there. Maybe you've already embarked on a transition from another tool to intelliflo. Do you agree with what we covered? Do you have some other insights? Please share your any lessons you've learned or any experiences you've had on the Ensemble platform, as we'd all love to hear your take. Certainly any tips, tricks, insights, pitfalls to be wary of, any of those things for any of these tech tools, we should absolutely share on the community. Now, as for my thoughts, look, as more of the bigger tech players, and by big, I mean tools that cover a lot of the advice elements, right? So these sort of bigger guerrilla systems, as more of those bigger ones have open architecture at their core, then the flexibility available to our practices is going to improve by leaps and bounds, right? This is just going to accelerate the rate at which we can implement different things and really cobble them together in our own tech stack. So what this is saying is this will mean we can combine more tools together than we ever have been able to before. Now, this is great, right? But it also means that there will be loads of different combinations businesses will come up with. And, this can lead for those of you out there who are still in the early stages of building its tech stack, then it can result in overwhelm, right? Because you're looking around and everybody's got different combinations and it all seems very complicated. So, what should you do and how should you build it for your practice? And when, you reach this sort of state of confusion, it's natural. First of all, welcome to the state we're all in. But, whenever I see people sort of reaching that stage of confusion, I always encourage them to get the team together and really step back from the nitty-gritty and brainstorm the main challenges the team are facing. And this is across all the roles. This is not just from an advisor's perspective. This is across the whole team. Let everyone sort of vote on the priority or the impact of every idea everybody comes up with. What are all the things that we're facing? We put them all up on the wall. Everybody votes. And ideally you want to identify the top, say, 3 that are these big things that we could, if we improved it, it'd really make a difference across the team and across the business. And only then consider how tech may be a part of the solution for those 3 big challenges. Generally this is when the next best tech choice becomes clear. Yeah. So don't start with the tech, start with a challenge, start with something that you're trying to solve, and then find the solution. Secondly, as you will have noticed with that discussion with Nick, we should all be demanding a lot more of our tech providers. And what I mean by that is in terms of our onboarding experience and how we get to know the tool, be sure they can answer where the best place to start might be for your practice. What should we do first? What should we do second? What should we leave till much later? Yeah. What are the pitfalls to avoid? Right? Where are the areas that most firms can get the most initial value? Now, of course, we're all different, right? And that makes sense. But they should have seen lots of businesses use their tool. Right. And they should have been watching how they went with that and hence can come up with some really wonderful insights for you. Don't make the same mistake as all the other practice. Make your own mistakes. Right. So I would be wary of any tool, particularly the bigger ones, that doesn't want to engage in the onboarding process, that doesn't want to provide you with those insights or merely doesn't have them, right? They should be trying to make this as easy as possible. It shouldn't feel too big. It should feel like you've got a trusted guide with you that can step you through how you're going to implement this in the practice, particularly for the big core systems. So just keep that in mind. Let's demand more of them and ensure that they really are using all that insight they'll have from their perspective of implementations of their tool. Now, as you know, there is only one skill we need to become bionic advisors, and that's avid curiosity. And to help you with that habit, today's Curiosity Corner app that caught my eye is called Circle. Now, you can find it at circle.so. And their tagline is creating a thriving community you can be proud of. So this is an online community platform. In a very simple sense, think your own Facebook, right? So Facebook is a community platform where we all get together to interact on the Ensemble platform. That's a community platform, right? And Circle is another one of these. Now, if you're not sure, whether, Peita, is that something I would ever need? Well, this can be, people use this sort of thing, across all sorts of industries. So these examples I'm using across all the sorts of industries, and they can be customer communities. So it could be a way that your customers can interact with each other, right? So if you're the niche advisor for people that do marathons, like you could get all your customers together and let them have their own community, right? It might be that you've got a course that you take clients through. And so this is a community that can step them through the course as they progress. Maybe you've got a membership program that they're a part of. This can help you run the membership program. Maybe you're providing a combination of broader content but one-on-one coaching. This can help you manage that. So it's a tool really that sort of brought together a whole lot of things that people had to have separate tools for, and it's now in the one place. So it's sort of, and it looks a lot like Facebook in that sense. So when you log in, there's groups down the left-hand side, there's content you can go in and out of, and then there's your feed based on where you are and what you've registered for or follow. You can have a member directory. You could have content delivered, all of those basics. You can then live stream into Circle so that you can be offering content ongoing that's then, of course, recorded and saved within there that somebody can go back and look at. You can have live events. You can have digests, so your newsletter and that sort of thing could be distributed via Circle. And it can have, of course, it's got a paywall. So it's got paid memberships. It can have section of the community that requires payment, whereas others can be free. You can have upsells from one to the other, free trials, coupons, discounts, recurring subscriptions, right? All and sundry. And there's thousands of integrations. So I mention this because while a lot of people may not be doing, cash flow programs or things like that, you might use drip-fed content or something that steps them through an experience with some learnings. You might be trying to do that, and this is a place that can live. Yeah. So, it has a lot of support. There's a huge community behind it, of course. So, it's a community tool. Of course, they're going to have a great community. And they have lots of examples of communities out there that you can learn from. It's very intuitive. The tool, encourages GIFs and emojis, all sorts of things that make it feel really engaging. And it's super quick and easy to get started. So I bring it up merely because it's something that may make something a unique experience for you, for your clients. It is not ludicrously expensive for what it is at all, and it may just solve that little problem that you were trying to work out yourself. I'd love to hear if you do utilize it. If you check it out and you think it's interesting, then I have actually run a program on this, so be happy to give you some feedback, so please don't hesitate to reach out. Welp. That's all we've got for this week, folks. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you'll get your advice tech fix automatically sent to you each Friday. And if you'd like a speaker to help your audience debate the business case for client portals, including a step-by-step process to work out if you need one and how to implement it in the practice, then I can either provide perhaps an initial webinar on the topic or even a full-blown in-person masterclass. It just depends on what your group of advisors would be best served by. We'll also be covering this in our Niche Down and Scale Up Masterclass next week, along with helping you work out exactly who you want to serve in 2023. If any of that is of interest, then please reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's LinkedIn/PeitaMD, PEITAMD. But as for the Niche Down and Scale Up Masterclass, I'd get in fast as there's actually a prep session early next week for those taking part, and you wouldn't want to miss out on that. Otherwise, I'll look forward to turning up in your earbuds next week. And remember, Advice Explorers, stay curious.